All right, I wanted to teach you how to trim your half rectangle triangles, and I am making these for my Miss Woodhouse quilt, but this method works for really any half rectangle triangles that you need to make. Just follow the pattern you're using carefully so you know which size to use. These for my Miss Woodhouse throw are starting at 3 by 6 inches and then will be trimmed down. So I'm going to start with our solid fabric. So when you have solids, it doesn't really matter which direction you cut your diagonal. So because these are double-sided, I'm just going to cut them both the same. So from bottom right corner to top left, and you just line it up with the corners of the rectangle and trim. And I'm going to do the same with my other one that is also a solid. So just line up your corners and trim. Okay, now when you have fabric like this that is not double-sided, so there's definitely a front and a back, then you have to follow the instructions on your pattern to know how many you're going to do in this orientation and how many in this orientation. So from bottom left to top right, or from bottom right to top left. So in the Miss Woodhouse quilt we do both. So I'm going to show you both ways. Now you can mark it first with your hair marker or with a marking pen, but since you're just lining up the corners, I don't usually mark them at this point. So just line up those corners again. So we're going to do one that's from bottom right to top left. And then on our other one, because I'm right-handed, I'm just going to kind of flip my piece here a little bit so I can go bottom left to top right. And you'll see why this matters in a second. Okay, so I've got my pieces. Now I'm going to pull in my solid, so you're going to line them up like this, and you're going to see that you're going to have two, that the diagonal seam will go bottom left to top right, and you're going to have two that are the opposite. So here, bottom right to top left. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to sew these together, and you just make sure that they're lined up so it makes a rectangle. And then you're just going to offset your little tip by about a quarter of an inch. So your little tip of your triangle will just hang off the end there, just by about a quarter of an inch here and on the other side as well. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together, and then I'll come back, show you how to trim them. All right, so you can see I'm back. I've done one of each orientation, and you can see I've got my little tails sticking out here on the end, and that's fine. So we're going to start with this one. If you're right-handed, this orientation is going to be easier to trim. So what you're going to look for is the little quarter-inch mark on your ruler. So it's this first little dot on mine, but just figure out you're going to go a quarter inch on both sides, and find this spot. Okay, now that's where you're going to line up the seam of your half rectangle triangle. And I've pressed my seams open just because it makes it lay a little bit flatter and it's easier for me. So what you're going to do is that little dot, you can see it right here, and if you want to use tape to mark it, you can. You're going to line that up with your seam, and then you're going to kind of move it until you've got a full quarter inch from the seam out to the side here. So there's a little bit extra that I'm going to trim. All right, so you're gonna have a little bit more on the top to trim, but make sure that that little quarter inch dot, that's a quarter inch square, is lined up with your seam, and that you have a little bit of space on this side. So once I've lined that up, I'm going to trim the side. Oh, my ruler just shifted, so just put it back on the dot, and then, okay, so you can see you're going to have about 1/8 of an inch at the very top, and then you want to have 1/4 inch down, about 1/4 over. So let's just double check. Yep. So we're good. So then we're going to flip, and then I'm trimming mine to 2.5 by 4.5. So I'm going to line that up and just make sure that at the top my little dot is lined up on the seam there. Okay. And then you'll trim the side and the top. And now you can see that when I sew this in, when I get 1/4 of an inch with my 1/4 inch seam, I'll be right at the line. And that way it'll turn out perfectly. So when you're doing this orientation and you're right-handed, so if you're left-handed it'll be flip-flopped, it's a little bit harder. So I like to do them on the side, and I'm going to find my little 1/4 inch dot, you can see that here, and I'm going to line that up here on the seam, and then make sure I'm like straight along the edge here. Okay, and then we'll just do it this way and this way. All right, and then we'll flip it, and we're doing 2.5 by 4.5. So here, and then just make sure my little dot is kind of pretty close to the seam there. And trim there. There. And now you've got your beautiful half rectangle triangles. And as you can see, when you sew them, and you sew your 1/4 inch, you should hit right, right there. And if you're, trying to line them up, you'll have that perfect V shape there. So, comment with any questions. Let me know if you found this helpful. And again, my name's Sarah, and I'm making the Miss Woodhouse quilt, and you can get that on my website, which is sarahlucillehandmade.com. And this method works for really any half rectangle triangles that you need to trim. Just make sure you follow your pattern for the correct size of starting squares and then what you're trimming to. Okay, thanks for being here.